Welcome to the first episode to the podcast. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Rob Morris, American Screenwriter, TV producer, and GTA Super Bitch. Let's just get right into it. So, Mr. Rob Morris, what was your first ever job that started your whole career?
Yeah, sure. My first job really ever that where I actually got a paycheck was like bagging groceries at the grocery store. I think that was the first thing that I did when I was like in high school. And I did stuff, when I was younger for money. But my first job after college that was in the industry that I ended up in for the longest time that I'm still in now. My first job in film and television was at Comedy Central. So when I graduated college in 2013, I moved to New York City where I had lived before and started getting in touch with people. A friend of mine had recently worked on a commercial for Comedy Central and got into a conversation with the director of that commercial. And he had mentioned that he needed a new assistant. And so I got his contact information and I hit him up and I was like, hey, I'm the guy that my buddy was talking about. And I did maybe 5 interviews. I interviewed a lot for that job, more than I've ever interviewed for anything else before. I had to meet with the boss, I had to meet with another boss, and then I had to meet with the team, and then I had to talk to HR, and it was just like round and round of interviews. But I finally got that job, and I worked there for a year as an executive assistant and a writer for commercials. So specifically, I worked in a department called Movie Studio Production, and we would work as Comedy Central with film studios that had movies that were coming out to try to find ways to make integrated marketing promos, which is a fancy term for like crossover commercials. So for example, while I was working there was a movie called Neighbors that came out in 2013 that was Zac Efron and Seth Rogen. It's like a college movie where they live next door to each other and stuff. And very briefly in that movie, the Workaholics guys from the show Workaholics on Comedy Central, they appear in that movie for like a second. It's a very quick cameo. And we did a sketch that's still on YouTube now. You can go look it up, where Seth Rogen and Zac Efron interview to work at the company that the Workaholics guys work at on the show. And so we did like a 7 or 8 minute sketch where they sit in the cubicle and it's silly, very sketch comedy. So I worked on stuff like that for like a year. But my big insecurity when I left school was I went to school for theater because I really wanted to learn about storytelling more than anything. And even though I work in film, I went to school for theater because I felt like that was the best way to learn about good storytelling and drama and character development and stuff like that. And a lot of times when you go to film school, you spend a lot of time filmmaking. Like they teach you how cameras and lights and sound and editing and all the technical stuff works. And you make movies and you write original movies. But a lot of it is a little bit of study of film and a lot of learning how to literally make a movie out of nothing, which is an amazing skill set. But I really wanted to study writing and storytelling and drama throughout history. So I went to theater school instead. And so when I graduated with a degree in directing theater and acting and stuff like that, I wanted to work in film and television, but I had this big insecurity that I was like, I've never really been on a film set. I've just worked on maybe a few student films. I acted a little bit in college. And like my buddy wrote a movie and he was like, hey, I got a part for you. Do you want to be in it? And I was like, okay. And they're like, hey, do you want to help with this film we're doing? Whatever, small stuff. But I'd never really been on like a big film set or TV set. And so when I got the job at Comedy Central, I was sitting in a cubicle every day. I lived in Manhattan and I was on like the Upper West Side, and I would take a train down every single morning and I would go sit at this cubicle at this desk and I would get to write things for like Marlon Wayans and Kevin Hart and Seth Rogen and Zac Efron. And like Larry the Cable Guy, and that was really cool. And I would get to see, sometimes they would pick my script and then they would turn it into a commercial or something, and that was really cool to see. But it was all on the computer. It wasn't like in person. I didn't meet any of these people. I didn't get to like go to the set and do any of it. We would do the pre-production, then they would fly to LA, where I live now, and they would shoot it and get to do everything cool on set. They being my boss and a couple other people on our team. And I would stay back and kind of man the phones and stuff because that's the level I was at. Then they would fly back and I didn't get to do anything. So I eventually quit that job because I really wanted to get out here in LA and I wanted to be on set.
And then you got to then work with these people, right?
No, I didn't work with them at all. Like, I never interacted with any of these people. That's kind of my point. I would write the scripts in like Microsoft Word and I would send them to Universal Studios and Sony and, you know, these big companies that were Disney. And I would send the people who worked at the studio the script. They would pick the ones they liked. Sometimes they would pick mine. Sometimes they would pick another person on the team who wrote a script. They'd pick their favorite. And then we would shoot that script. But I never interacted with anybody. I would pay them. Part of my job was to go into the system and process their payments. So like we worked for Key and Peele one time. We worked with them and did a whole commercial. We did a whole commercial for a Liam Neeson movie. And we hired them to do a sketch for a commercial. And so I had to go in and process their contracts and pay them and make sure all of that happened. But I didn't ever get to meet them. I never got to talk to them or engage with them at all. So that was part of why I left Comedy Central, was because I wanted to work more directly with the talent and be on set and interact with people. So I quit Comedy Central and I moved to Los Angeles.
Where are you from, and like where did you move around for your a career?
I was born in Texas. I grew up mostly in Texas. I lived in New York a little bit in high school, but mostly, yeah, I grew up in Texas. And yeah, I was born in Dallas, but I was mostly grew up in Austin.
How old were you when you moved to New York?
I was probably 23. I went to college a little bit late. I took a gap. So I didn't start my college program until I was 20. And then I finished when I was like 23, 24. That's when I moved to New York. And I lived there for the second time. I lived there for a year. And then I moved to LA.
When did you move to LA?
Let's see. Well, I've lived in Los Angeles for 10 years. So I moved here in 2016 in February.
So then you were working at Comedy Central when GTA 5 came out, right?
That's right. I worked at Comedy Central the year that GTA 5 came out. I would sit at my desk and write commercials and listen to like GTA 5 o'clock with James Jarvis and Dan Dawkins. They were doing that show back then, but it was called GTA 5 o'clock. And I would just like sit and listen to them and geek out and look at screenshots and do all that stuff while I was, you know, writing commercials at Comedy Central. Then the game came out. I had actually at that point, I had never been to LA ever. I'd never like set foot in the city. And I had played San Andreas, which ironically, when GTA San Andreas came out, that was 2004. I also lived in New York in high school. So both times the San Andreas-based games came out, I lived in New York City. And I played through both of those while I sat in an apartment in Manhattan. And then I moved out here. And I'm one of those people that like I played the game like crazy for like, what was it? Maybe a year and a half, 2 years almost. And then all of a sudden I'm out here and I'm like, that's Del Perro, that's Vespucci, holy shit.
And it must have been crazy to like move to Los Angeles after like experiencing GTA 5 and seeing all these different landmarks and, you know, different locations from the game.
Amazing. I mean, it was like a dream, dude. I grew up playing GTA 3 and 4, but I also was living in New York sometimes. So I already kind of had that experience, but it wasn't exactly the same. And being an adult, I think, and going from playing the game and then moving to the city, it was crazy, dude, because like you think GTA Online starts back in 2013, and in the beginning, before they changed it, that game would start, you would boot up online, and your character would like look out a window in an airplane, and then it would land, and Lamar would pick you up from the airport, and then your game would start. And that's like that actually happened to me. Like I ended up driving there, but the first time I went, I flew to visit and check out LA, and then I moved there. I drove there, in my car, and it was just, man, it felt just like the game. It was crazy. I felt like I was literally like booting into the game in real life, and I got to be honest, dude, it still kind of feels that way because my dream was always to like I always wanted to be a DJ in Grand Theft Auto, and specifically I loved the California parody. And so now with my YouTube channel, it's kind of like I am a GTA DJ kind of character, but I also really live in the city. So it's like living a dream. I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, man. I just want to say, man, Rob has an awesome community of people in his chat. Everyone's so kind to each other. Like I almost never see any hate, any any like a negative trolls ever. Like everyone's so kind and friendly, and that's like something that I really love of what Rob has.
Oh, I love my community, dude. My YouTube community is amazing, and you're a part of it, and I appreciate that. Yeah, it's really unusual, which really surprised me because I think for me as someone who, I never really dealt with a lot of crazy hate or trolling and stuff, even when I would play multiplayer video games. Like I would play GTA Online over the years, and a lot of people would talk about, yeah, there's like griefers sometimes. You're trying to sell cargo and they blow you up with a jet or whatever. But that's the game's kind of designed for that. So I don't totally blame them for being someone who chooses to play that way, as annoying as it can be. But I didn't really encounter a bunch of people like being jerks on GTA Online or on other games, really. Not really too bad. I would say like 5-10% of the time, maybe max. And but when I would watch content or I would see people online talking about GTA Online or talking about online gaming, it's like, oh man, it's all griefers, it's all jerks, it's all like trolls. And I just didn't have that experience. And so when I was getting involved with making content and getting myself out there in the gaming space on YouTube and stuff, I kind of expected a bunch of assholes. I really thought it was going to be bad. And it really wasn't. It's been pretty good. Every now and then I get a troll, but I usually make a joke out of it and find some funny way to give them a hard time without being mean back. Like I'll make jokes out of whatever they're doing to be a jerk. And it usually is pretty disarming. I've actually had a couple of people who have showed up in my live streams who got a little heated or they got a little in conflict, maybe either with something I said or with other people in the chat. And I would say 9 times out of 10, I mean, not even 9 times out of 10, because there hasn't even been 10 people, maybe 4 out of 5 people, it's like they come back later with a great attitude and they're super nice and they knock that shit off and they just become like a cool, fun fan and a member of the channel. So I appreciate that.
And then a change of topic here. What goes into screenwriting a show and like writing a show, and like what does that process look like?
Like how did I make Vinewood Public Access?
No, like writing a show.
Well, it all depends, dude, because, for example, I've never worked on a show where there is like a really set script and a development of like narrative characters. And as far as like my job as a and I've written TV shows and stuff that I have in development on my own personal level that I would like to make. But most of the writing that I've done for television has been either shorthand or it's been comedy writing where it was more of sketch based or like punch up. So sketch based meaning like commercials, short form comedy sketches. And then punch up is basically where you take something that's not really that funny and there's a company or a business and they want you to add jokes to it. So that's something that I've done a lot of. I've done a lot of like punch up and taking shows that weren't particularly funny and trying to turn them into comedies.
But have you ever like worked on parodies?
I've done parody stuff before. Yeah, absolutely. I've also done a fair amount of reaction TV where the show is people reacting to other content or other shows, and their reactions, their comments, their jokes need to be like punched up by writers. And so that's been something that I've spent a lot of time on.
And so what parodies are like most notable or like most memorable that you have worked on in your career?
What type of parodies are most notable? Let's see. I've done a fair amount of parodies in sketch that were kind of calling upon movies and references. I'm trying to think of something in particular that I really liked. I mean, I've done parodies of Westerns. I've done parodies of horror. That's always really funny. I feel like those are the things that I like making fun of are the things that take themselves too seriously. And the whole point of horror in particular is like, I'm not a really big horror movie fan. I don't have a problem with it. Like, I get why people like it, but it's not really fun for me to watch a horror movie. I don't like being startled. I don't like things like jumping out at me is like not fun for me. So, but horror, in order for it to work, you have to take it very seriously. Everything's like super serious and you can't make any jokes about it. And it has to be very grounded. And to me, kind of taking the piss out of that and making jokes about that stuff is really fun. So horror parody is fun. I've done some stuff in that department. Westerns, yeah, also really funny. That's another thing. Like if you play Red Dead Redemption, it's such a fun game and there is some comedy in it, but mostly it's a really serious game. Like everything is so high stakes and everyone's really scared or sick or...
And also of how it ends.
Yeah, of course. And so I think Western is another thing that's really fun to kind of make fun of and parody because it's not supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be serious.
Like, sort of making like jokes out of a 9/11.
Yeah, I mean that would be like an intense thing that people are not in love with making fun of. But I am one of those people that thinks difficult things in life, the whole purpose of parody and satire is to make things easier for people. The reason that we make jokes and the reason parody even exists is to find a way to make difficult things easier. So when life gets hard or traumatizing or tragic, making a joke in that difficult time and laughing through it is sometimes the only way some people can even process it. I mean, dude, your name is Soviet Man, and I've got a lot of friends who live in the States now, but they're from either, grew up in Soviet Russia or former Soviet areas like Ukraine and Belarus and different things like that. And they have the best sense of humor. And I've talked to them about that because they'll be like, well, you have to make jokes where I'm from. Otherwise you would go crazy. Like you have to find a way to laugh about it because it's been so hard.
And so tragic too.
Yeah, and the tragedy leads to the comedy because that's how we process it. The whole point of comedy and the reason we evolved as human beings to like make jokes and be funny and do comedy is a way of processing how hard life is. That's what it's for.
And a perfect segue into the next topic, like what got you into doing open mics?
Oh, like doing stand-up? I've been in love with stand-up comedy as an art form since I was a little kid. It's always been one of my favorite things. I had parents who weren't really concerned about me seeing adult material. So like I wasn't a kid that like always had to watch kid shows. I would watch like funny rated R movies with my parents, and I grew up watching like action movies and, you know.
I didn't really get that.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't have that experience. Some people, like, their parents were really, like, they grew up in kind of a sheltered experience, and their parents...
I had to hide my GTA.
I didn't really have that experience. There wasn't much that I wasn't allowed to do. I remember I wanted to go see the South Park movie, and my mom found out. We were going to go see it. I think we were, like, in line to get tickets. And the guy who was selling us the tickets was like, just so you know, there's like male genitalia in this movie. Like, because there's a whole joke with Saddam Hussein where he holds up like a fake penis. And that happens in that movie. And the ticket guy told my mom as we were buying tickets. And I was pretty young. I mean, that movie came out in like 2000 or something, like in that ballpark. And my mom looked over at me and she was like, no, we're not going to see this. And I was furious. I was so mad because my parents never said no when it came to movies and TV and stuff. There was never, like, if a sex scene came on when I was little, I was supposed to like cover my eyes and like not look at it. Yeah, and you do this, right? You always are like trying to see it. So like that was a big deal. Like she said we couldn't go to that movie, and we ended up buying tickets to watching some other movie, and I don't even remember what it was, and I hated it because it wasn't South Park. But my point is, like, when I was growing up, I grew up on my parents' stuff that they liked. So my parents loved like Eddie Murphy movies, and we would watch Steve Martin and all these old comedians, and then we would watch their stand-up, and I would watch George Carlin and all these people. And then when I got older, I really got into kind of Gen X stand-up, so like Patton Oswalt and David Cross, and I fell in love with Andy Kaufman, and I always liked like Robin Williams and all of these people. I just love stand-up. It was my favorite thing. I used to actually fall asleep listening to old stand-up records that I'd already heard like 20 times.
I literally did that last night.
Yeah, it's like a lullaby. It was weird. I mean, people like shouting about like, man, what is it about golf? Like, I don't know. It just made me go to bed. So I always loved stand-up. It's always one of my favorite art forms ever. Then the first time I ever did anything that was like stand-up, it certainly wasn't, but it was my first experience doing anything like that. I actually gave a eulogy at a funeral.
Oh, what's a eulogy?
A eulogy is a speech that someone gives at someone's funeral or a memorial service when someone dies. So when I was 19, this is a kind of a sad story, so trigger warning if that's important to anybody. But when I was 19, I still lived in Austin, and I was working in town, not at an entertainment-related business or anything. And I got a call that my middle school theater teacher, who I was very close with, and even after middle school I stayed in touch with him. He worked at the same theater in town that I did, so he was like a friend and a mentor of mine. He was the first person the first adult that ever like taught me how to do anything theater or arts or anything like that. My family's not like that. They all work in, like, my parents worked in automotive repair. My stepdad was a mechanic. Like, everybody in my family was like working class people. And if they didn't work using their hands, they worked in the office for a place where people use their hands. Like they all were in the business of that. No one in my family was like an artist or anything like that. Well, my stepdad, to give him credit, he used to draw and paint and do custom paint on cars, like hot rods and stuff. So that's how I kind of got into cars when I was younger. And he also played the guitar, and he taught me how to play the guitar. But that was on the side. Those were like hobbies. He didn't do that for a living. So the first adult to like kind of talk to me about doing art stuff was my middle school theater teacher. And when I was 19, obviously I hadn't been in middle school in many years. But I got a phone call that he had completed suicide. And it was a very tragic story. The story is not very good. Obviously, it's a story about suicide. But
so how did he take his own life?
Well, if you want to know, he was a very troubled dude, and I don't think a lot of us knew that he had as many issues as he did. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that's how it goes. People don't realize that they're struggling. And he walked out into his front yard and shot himself. So very not public. It's not like there were a bunch of people around, but he didn't fall asleep in the car, in the garage. He didn't like hang himself in a closet. Like it was very dramatic. And so it was a big deal in the community because, like I said, he had been a middle school teacher in that school district for a very long time. He was an older dude. He was probably, I think he maybe was like 58, 60, early 60s, something like that. And I was also very close with his wife, and we used to do plays together, and I stayed friends with her for a very long time. And when it happened, he had so many students who still lived in the same area, and he was very close, and he was involved with this theater. So there were just hundreds and hundreds of people that were like very affected by this. It wasn't like a quiet moment in the community. They asked probably like 6 or 7 people to speak at his memorial service, which was a few days later. And they asked me to do it. And I wrote down some things on a piece of paper, and it wasn't like a script, but it was like bullet points of like things I wanted to say because he was such an impactful person in my life. And because he was who he was, they had his memorial service in a theater, like with a stage and it was a renovated movie theater that they turned into like a stage play location. And he was an atheist, so he really didn't want a religious service at all. That was really important to him. He didn't want to be buried. He wanted to be cremated. So there was no viewing of the body. There was no church service. There was no burial at a cemetery. So really the only thing was this memorial service at this theater. And they asked me to do it, and they did the like, at a stand-up show, they'd call it a lineup, and I was last. So I had to like close it out, and which was, it wasn't like his wife or he had a kid. It wasn't his kid. I was the last person to talk. And so I listened to everybody else talk, and everybody was obviously very sad. And everybody's stories were like, they were crying or they were very like serious. And maybe a couple of people kind of made a couple small jokes to lighten the mood, but mostly it was a very serious thing. And I watched this whole thing, and I had some stuff written down, and it was, the stuff I wrote down was not jokes. It was like I wrote down serious stuff, and I had things that I really wanted to say about how important he was. But I watched this whole thing, and everybody was so like tense and sad and crying. And I got up on stage, and there were probably like 300 or 400 people there. It was a pretty big crowd. And I had never really been on stage in front of that many people as myself. I had been on stage in front of that many people in characters and in plays and musicals and stuff, but never as me. And I had a microphone, and I had my list of bullet points, and I started the list, and I said a couple things in the beginning, and I got a laugh really early without meaning to. Like I said something or whatever, and everybody kind of chuckled. And it broke the tension of the room. Like it just like was like, oh, people could breathe, and he said something funny, and it made it okay. Kind of like what I was saying earlier about how comedy makes things easier. And I just leaned into that, and I barely talked about all the stuff on my list, and I ended up just making one big point and telling this story and kind of talking the way I do on the radio and the way I did in my stand-up. And I just stream of consciousness and not a lot of plan to it. And my point was, a lot of people overlook middle school and junior high, whatever you call it, as the time in your life when it's like things don't matter as much. They're like high school we always talk about because that's like such a big deal. And then elementary school is such a story, but people kind of don't talk about middle school. And when they do talk about it, it's like, oh, it's the worst. You don't know who you are and everybody's so awkward and blah, blah, blah.
I had a really horrible time in middle school.
Most people do. I've talked to a lot of people about this over the years because this speech that I made at this memorial service kind of started my brain thinking about this. I've never really stopped thinking about it. I had a great time in middle school. I enjoyed middle school more than high school. I went to 3 different high schools because I moved a lot. I went to one middle school for 3 years, and it was like the best. It was like one of the best times of my whole life. And part of that was because of Jim Pryor, the man who I'm talking about. And he really made me feel valuable and made me feel like I had worth. And I was a really bad student. Starting in like 6th grade all the way until I graduated high school, I always got shitty grades. I never did my homework. I never studied. I just like didn't care about it. And when I found theater through Mr. Pryor, I felt like I had value, like I wasn't going to be a total loser, and like there was something that I could do that was valuable to the world. And that happened to me in middle school at the time that a lot of people are like, that time doesn't really matter. And that was the point of my speech at the memorial service, was just about how important he was because of how big of difference that time can actually make. Because I really do believe, and I still do, that middle school is when kids start to figure out who they are. Sometimes it takes longer, and they don't figure out who they are until they're 30. But middle school is the time when you can start figuring out who you are if you're interested in doing that. And I did, and it was because of him. I told this whole story and made this whole speech, and I found a lot of moments to be funny and make jokes and lighten the mood. And I didn't tell it like it was a sad story. I just told it like I was having fun. And the way that it felt to be in his class and to learn from him, I had the same energy. And when I got off stage, I got a lot of compliments. And I remember thinking, I think I kind of just did like a half theater, half stand-up routine without meaning to. And then when I moved to LA, which was many years later.
And how old were you?
27, 26. So it was like 8 or 9 years later. Yeah, and I didn't really do stand-up the whole time in between. I mean, I did a lot of theater and performances and different artistic things, but it wasn't really stand-up. I kept telling myself I was going to go to open mics when I was in college because in North Carolina there was a club like 30 minutes away. And me and my friends would always be like, we should go to an open mic and do that. We never did. And I finally went to LA. I did my first open mic at a place called El Cid on Sunset, which was like close to my house. They had what's called a mixed mic, which is actually not very popular in the stand-up community. Most stand-up people will tell you to go to a comedy club and do an open mic. But I went to a mixed mic, which is where they're like, all right, coming up next is this guy playing the guitar. All right, coming up next is this guy doing poetry, and then somebody doing stand-up. And it's all sorts of art forms. I haven't done a lot of those, actually, probably less than 10 in my whole life. But that my first one was a mixed mic. And then I just got into it. And I started going to, I looked up, there was a calendar that probably still exists of all the open mics in LA so that you could see when and where all of them were and hit as many of them as you could to kind of schedule out your night if that's what you were doing. Sometimes I would go up right after, like a huge comedian at a club because that's just like what LA is like. I would do open mics with people like Kyle Kinane and Joey Diaz and Mike Lawrence.
Damn, bro, Joey Diaz.
Yeah, Joey Diaz used to go to the same open mic theater that I went to, because he wanted to do it with regular new comedians. It was interesting to him. And I got a gig every Sunday hosting an open mic for like a year. I did stand-up shows there. I did a couple of YouTube shows while I was there. And I spent 2018 and 2019 and part of 2020 taking it really seriously. And then the end of my stand-up story is I decided to open an open mic theater in Austin, Texas, where I was from, as a way to help out my dad, because my dad was sick. And he called me and he was like, I'm sick. I can't work. I have a little bit of money saved up. I need a business to run that's kind of passive and I don't have to do that much, but it generates some income for me, because he was having trouble qualifying for disability. And so in December of 2019, right before the pandemic, I moved to Austin. Not permanently. It was meant to be temporary. I was only going to go for 3 months. I kept my apartment in LA and everything. And I moved to Austin to open this open mic place. And we could talk for like 5 hours about that story because it's crazy. But I went in 2 years from trying to open an open mic theater, everyone trying to cancel me. People were furious that I was doing it. I was on the hometown radio. They were talking shit about me. They didn't even know I was from Austin. They thought I was some California jerk who was in town to rip everybody off. It's a whole crazy story. Joe Rogan ended up following my comedy club on Instagram and mentioned me a bunch of time on his podcast. I met some of my absolute stand-up heroes, and all sorts of other people. I became friends with like Brett Ernst, and I met and worked with Mark Normand and Godfrey and Tony Hinchcliffe and Brian Redban and Rocky Dale Davis and April Macy, Steph Tulev. It's crazy, like all the people that I met in that 2 years, like running people through that club, because it was a weird time where like a lot of venues around the country were not operating because of the pandemic and state laws, or just people who didn't want to do it. And the comedy club in Austin shut down. They like went out of business, and they made it sound like it was forever, like the summer of 2020. So we kind of picked up their business and ran it for a while. And all the comics around the country that were like, I can't even play the state of Washington anymore because there's state laws saying that we can't do shows at all. But Texas was like, there is no pandemic. You can do whatever you want. And so we kind of picked up the business where everybody else couldn't work. And so we got all these huge people, even though we were nobody. And then eventually I transitioned from like doing comedy to like not really wanting to do stand-up anymore. The club kind of wore me out and made me realize that I don't like being up super late and being out at bars and clubs and stuff. I'm just not really like that. And so it kind of washed the stand-up desire out of me, even though I still really like it. And eventually I also got tired of running the business. Running a comedy club's really hard. You basically have to run a comedy club 40% of the time and run a restaurant and bar the other 60% of the time. And that was not interesting to me at all. Even though I had a really good staff, I just wasn't interested anymore. So I eventually passed that business on to the other people who were working there, and just came back to LA to work in TV again.
Was it at the Vulcan gas company?
No, it was called the Romo Room. Well, it came and went, dude. And the Vulcan is still there. The Vulcan and the Romo Room were like the only two comedy spots in town for a while. And then there was this club called the Creek and the Cave that used to be in New York. They came down and joined us. And so it was the three of us. It was Creek and the Cave, Vulcan, and the Romo Room. And the three of us were the only ones doing it. Rogan would play Vulcan, Hinchcliffe would play Vulcan, and then they would finish their sets sometimes and come to our club. we would bring in mostly headliners from out of town and then do small showcase shows of local comedians. And then eventually we shut down right before Mothership kind of took off. And so everybody from the Romo Room and Vulcan kind of coalesced and became the Mothership. And now it's like Mothership, Creek in the Cave, and whatever else is going on there. I don't know. I haven't really been in Austin for a few years, but yeah, that was when like Tim Dillon moved there for 20 seconds and then left, and Shane Gillis moved there, and Tony Hinchcliffe moved there, and it was during that whole thing. Yeah, for a minute, a bunch of people left afterwards. Tom Segura and Christina P moved YMH there. That all happened during that time. I was like in Austin while that transition was happening.
Since that you lived in LA, did you ever perform at the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard?
I've never performed at the Comedy Store. I was going to several times. That's the thing about comedy, man. A lot of times things almost happen, and either your schedule changes or someone moves you around or you get bumped or whatever. I've been to the Comedy Store a lot. I have performed at the Improv quite a few times, which is the other big club out here that I like. And then the Laugh Factory I've been to a lot, but I've never performed at. The club I've done the most out here is Flappers, which is in Burbank. And yeah, it's in Burbank, which is kind of like in the valley on the east side of LA. Flappers Comedy Club it's like where Jay Leno and Jeff Garland and Joey Diaz and a bunch of other people kind of hang out in the suburbs because they don't want to go all the way into West Hollywood all the time. They were really great about fostering new talent, so it was a lot easier to get on at Flappers. And my first, what was it, 2017, 2018, I entered a comedy contest there where, like, if you win, you get to go to the next round. And so I ended up winning like 3 rounds of that. And then I went to the finals in December, I think it was. And I didn't win there. One of my buddies did. But yeah, I did the most work at Flappers and the Improv.
What was the worst that you ever bombed while doing stand-up?
Oh, that's a good question. The worst I ever bombed... 2 things probably. I went back to Austin once. I did a bunch of times. This was before the Romo Room. I went back to Austin before the pandemic, before my club, and I decided to do an open mic once I had been doing open mics and shows out in LA. And I was doing okay. And I went to an open mic, and I didn't know anybody there. And it had the worst... This is part of why I ended up trying to open an open mic theater in Austin. It was one of the worst open mics I've ever been to. It was at a theater called Cold Town Theater that they closed, but maybe they opened back up. I had done a show there as an MC for some friends of mine who were improv comics. They had an improv show, and I hosted it, and it went great. And I had a good time and like did my bits, and it worked well, and I got a lot of compliments. Then I came back later around Christmas time, and I went to this open mic at the same theater, and the way it was structured was so stupid. Like, they had like 35 people on this list. It was so long. It went on forever. And they didn't keep anybody in the theater. You didn't have to stay in the room. Everybody hung out in the lobby talking super fucking loud, and then people would come in one at a time and perform for like 3 other people in this room. It was like ridiculous. And in LA, there's only really 2 kinds of open mics. Well, there's 3. There's club mics where everybody stays in the club because they are waiting to see if they're going to go, and they don't really leave. They don't want you going in and out. So if you're doing an open mic in the lab at the Improv, everybody pretty much stays in the room. Same thing with Potluck at the Comedy Store. Then there are these pay-to-play mics. Well, there's bar mics. That's the second one, where that's kind of what I'm talking about. Then the pay-to-play mics are the ones where you pay them $5 to do 5 minutes or whatever their rate is. And the rules for those open mics are you have to stay in the room. Like, you have to get there on time, and you have to sit and watch everybody else. That's what I tried to open in Austin, and they hated it. And I did that because I went to this mic, and everybody's talking up in the lobby like they're all so loud. It's like, I have a microphone, and I'm like, can you guys keep it down? You could hear them in the lobby being louder than the comedian on stage. So I did my set for like 4 people and just ate shit and felt like I was so alone. And I was like, this is terrible. Years later, I would try to fix that problem, and Austin was like, you shut your mouth. We like our stupid broken open mics. But now the mothership's there and everything's different because it works like a real club, which is great. But I bombed really bad there. The worst experience I ever had doing stand-up, and it was embarrassing. And I do not really blame anyone else for this. This was like, the story I just told, I blame the way it was set up. I also had bad material and did not do a good job. The story I'm about to tell, which I know we're running out of time, I'll try to be fast about this. The story that I'm about to tell is my fault. And it is one of the most regrettable nights of my entire life. I did a show. Doug Benson, the comedian who I love, used to have a show called The Benson Interruption. And the idea was he would have comedians come out and he would have a mic over on the side of the stage. They would try to do their act and he would interrupt them and talk shit. Not heckle as much, but like make jokes and comment, almost like he was doing like a DVD commentary of their stand-up set. And they were supposed to try to push through and finish their set without getting distracted. Great show idea. I tried to do something similar because I would host open mics at this theater, and my buddy Travis would be on a mic at the back of the room, and we would do bits with each other while I was hosting. We said, let's do a show where we invite all our favorite comedian friends to do like a Benson interruption. We'll sit in the back with mics and kind of give them shit and talk over them. It was terrible. We did not explain the concept well enough to the comedians. I thought they understood what it was. Not enough people showed up. It was only medium attended, so we were kind of doing it for ourselves. The comedians we picked were mostly jerks. Like, there were some cool people on it, but they were kind of, and I didn't pick everybody. My buddy Travis picked some people too. And it was a disaster. They got up and were like, instead of doing their act, they were heckling the idea of the show we were doing. So they were on stage going like, what is this stupid thing? Like, I'm talking, but you're talking. But it's like, no, you need to do your act or the show doesn't work. And so they were just like riffing and not really doing stand-up. I crashed out hard because they were like making fun of the thing I was trying to do and also not doing it right. And so I tried to heckle them back, and my jokes didn't work. My heckles weren't funny. I just came across as an angry jerk. It was terrible. I actually that night ended my relationship with my buddy Travis. He was so furious with how I dealt with it and how the whole night went that he didn't talk to me again. We've never spoken since then. I didn't do any stand-up for probably like 3 months because it ruined my night. And people came up to me afterwards and were like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm fine. I was just like, man, I was so pissed. And I did not deal with it well. It was really, really a disaster. And I think I'm really glad that it happened too, because I learned so many things from it. First of all, I learned that broadly speaking, open mic comedians are not prepared to do anything elevated, meaning like they're good if they were like, do your act. And even that they would be maybe good. But if you're like, this is like a meta bit on a bit, it's like, we're doing stand-up show, but you need to do your act and we're going to interrupt. Like they just didn't get it. And even if I'd explained it really well, I'm not sure that they would have handled it well, because they're not theater people. They're not there for complex theatrical things. They just want to do fucking comedy, period. That's it. And if you complicate it, they cannot handle it. So that was a good lesson to learn. Another lesson was, if I get legitimately upset, which does not happen very often, I'm not funny. I'm not a funny dude when I'm mad. I can try to be, and it just comes off as mean, angry, and it just bombs. And it was a really good lesson for me because it taught me, like, if I start to get upset and I'm in a situation where people are watching me, I have to calm down. I've got to pull it back, don't get emotional, and just relax. Don't be so serious, because angry Rob is not funny Rob. That's why when I get trolls on my live stream or anything like that, man, I just keep it light. Even if I got to fake it a little bit to make it. And they don't really bother me, so I don't actually get upset. But even if I got upset, I would really, that was so long ago. That was like 10 years ago. I would just like pull it back and be like, it's fine, whatever. And the best thing you can do with them too, this is another thing that I learned that I did not do well on the night that I'm talking about. If someone's really coming for you and you don't know what to do and you're not good at hitting them back, like I'm not really a roast comic, just agree with them. Find a fun way to agree with them and it disarms them completely. When they're like, you're a fucking idiot, and be like, man, I am dumb. I am not a smart person, I'll give you that. And they're like, this is a waste of time. This was a huge mistake. All I do is make mistakes, man. I'm a mistake machine. That's what I do. I wake up and fail. That's just who I am as a person. That will at least get you through it, and then they'll give up really fast. And I do that on my streams all the time. If anyone comes up talking mess, they're like, this guy's clickbaiting, he doesn't know. I'm like, that's right. I'm in the clickbait business, dude. Thank you for clicking. I'm glad you're here. And then they give up. They don't know what to do with that. Is it funny? Not really. But it disarms them, and it makes that moment go away, because it's not fun to beat up a person who then starts punching themselves. You're like, you're like weird and crazy, and I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Thank you for asking that story. I haven't told it in a long time.
And then to sort of like steer it away from like what we were talking about, and I want to get into like more GTA questions. So out of all of the radio stations, what is your favorite one of all time?
Chatterbox FM, the first one. The first talk radio station from GTA 3 where Laszlo takes the call-ins from the city. It's only like 45 minutes long, but it is what inspired Vinewood Public Access. I love, if we're talking talk radio stations in particular, I just love the call-in aspect. I think it keeps it so fresh. I struggle with things like Chakra Attack in GTA 5. Like, I don't think it's bad. It's funny. And there are some call-in elements and different stuff, but just two people screaming and talking for a long time, I don't like it. I love Danny McBride on Blaine County Talk Radio. He takes call-ins, and his segment is fantastic. If we're talking music and not the talk radio, I would say man, it's tough, man. Probably one of the stations from Vice City. Also VCPR is one of my favorite things ever. The public radio in Vice City is amazing. And then, but music, I would say Flash FM, maybe. Really, really good. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. And then Radio Mirror Park is my favorite one from the HD universe.
And then what is your favorite radio from like each GTA game?
What's my favorite radio station from each game? Well, I mean, I think Vice City and GTA 3 have better talk radio than San Andreas. I think Chatterbox FM and VCPR are better than West Coast Talk Radio. K-Chat is fine, but VCPR and Chatterbox are the shit. As far as from each one, I'll just lightning round it. So, Head Radio from GTA 3 is my favorite music station. Flash FM, we'll say, from Vice City. Probably, oh man, I wish I had listened to the radio when I did my recent San Andreas playthrough. I'd have a better answer for this. I mean, probably the rap station, right? Los Santos Radio or where? What is that one called? The hip hop station from Los Santos is amazing in San Andreas. I struggle to remember what it's called. I think it's called the same thing in 5. I think it's the same one. But let's see. Then GTA 4, this is going to be a weird take. JNR, the jazz radio station. The jazz radio station that plays jazz music in GTA 4. It's literally like saxophone and piano. It's like just classic jazz. I feel like that fits the vibe of GTA 4 better than any other radio station. Also, the talk radio in GTA 4 is better than the talk radio in GTA 5. Both of them. WKTT with Jason Sudeikis is incredible. And then PLR, Public Liberty Radio, they're both amazing. They're both really, really good. And then GTA 5, if I'm picking one radio station, it's Radio Mirror Park for sure.
Man, mine's is Nonstop Pop.
Everybody loves Nonstop Pop, dude. Everyone loves DJ Kara. I would say also shout out Lowdown. The Lowdown is amazing. Like Pam Grier is a great host and very much before like your time and kind of before mine. But Pam Grier is an American icon in that department. And just, yeah, Aaron Neville and Marlena Shaw, like all of that classic soul music, it crushes.
And so that'll probably have to then conclude it for my first ever podcast. Rob, thank you for coming on here. Thank you for sharing all your stories, the ups and the downs.
We definitely covered ups and downs, that's for sure.
And Rob, you have an awesome a community, and I really cannot wait to see to where your channel goes in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're going to be doing really cool stuff on Vinewood Public Access for the next year at least. Maybe more than that. We'll see what the legs of this game turn out to actually be. And I also have a new channel that I'm doing with my wife called Oxford Study, where we're talking about film and television and different stuff, because my wife's a therapist. She's also in the Screen Actors Guild. She's been on a whole bunch of TV shows. And so, yeah, it's fun, man. I like the content creation life. I'm enjoying it.
And then is there anything that like you want to like try and promote?
Yeah, you know what? Get a mug. They're great.
So yeah, everybody, go and purchase a mug from Vinewood Public Access.
Available on the channel. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. This was a good time.
Once again, man, thank you so much for coming on, man.
You got it.
And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.